This is Colin Arnold. He and his son Daniel are conservation graziers. They're releasing goats into a weedy, overgrown section along a train track in Belgrave, Victoria. They're not just removing weeds, they're conserving the native environment. Over the next 12 months, we're going to follow along the story of this badly overgrown, weed-infested gully, and we're going to see how goats and goat grazing, when it's applied properly, turn rubbish back into pristine environment.
G'day, I'm Colin and welcome to day one here at Belgrave. We're going to look at this site which is really weed infested, and we're going to put goats in here today, and we're going to start the process of cleaning up this site of a whole range of weeds. So meet some of the stars of the show. We all know goats eat blackberries, they love blackberries. And this is just one little example of a blackberry on the site. But we've got a whole range of weeds here, and I want to introduce you to some of those so you get a picture of how broad the range of weeds are in here and how big the problem is. Hidden amongst this site is English ivy. English ivy is a real feature weed in the Dandenongs, and it doesn't look too bad here, but it's right through the site. And the problem with English ivy is it'll climb up eucalypts and acacias and it'll kill them. Won't do it to elm trees or oak trees, the trees that it's used to, where it comes from, but here in Australia it's a real problem plant. Here's another one, Calisthesia. It's a climber. It will literally cover everything that it can find, and big yellow, big white flower, real problem. Wandering trads right through this site, big problem up in the Dandenongs, big problem for a lot of people. And we've got honeysuckle as well, so another climber that will just swamp everything. So we've got ground cover that'll swamp everything, and another climber that'll swamp everything in the upper story. Probably the main feature plant we've got on this site is ginger. This is a garden escapee. It's in a lot of old-fashioned gardens, but it is swamping this site. It's filling this gully, which is always moist 12 months of the year, and it just takes over. It's a bit like bamboo, really. But we also have woody weeds like the poplars over here. So these poplars in the distance here, silver poplar, it's suckering everywhere, it's just going to take over. We can't ignore buttercup because this has a secret weapon, and that is it's allelopathic. That means it produces compounds that it releases into the soil that inhibit the growth of other plants. So it effectively makes its own herbicide, and alongside it is drain sedge. That's this little one here, very common weed that also does the same thing. So these plants can dominate, even though they only grow that high, because they produce compounds that stop anything else from growing. So standing under this sycamore tree, which is another big weed in the Dandenongs, we've got the poplars that we mentioned. You can see all around me this vegetation that's everywhere, and goats will take all of those things out. They'll deal with virtually every weed that's on this site. But it's not only goats eating weeds that this story's about. This is about regenerating the soil. It's looking after the site. It's about goats eating problematic species, which usually require a lot of herbicide and a lot of heavy equipment. Goats will do all that work, open the site up, and give us the chance to see some natural regen of plants that should be here, and some supplementary planting to help it along a bit. So we'll get a result that's much better for the environment, looks after the birds and the insects, no chemicals applied on this site, and just a beautiful story, really. So what I love about this site is the great contrast. We've got the area that we've just talked about with all the weed species in there that goats are going to deal with that. But on the other side of the fence here, we've got a site that's really typically managed. In this case, the ginger, which was previously taller than me, has now been brush cut. All of that material is now on the ground. It's just leaf litter that swamps the ground. Nothing else can grow. Only the ginger can come through it. And we're going to see over the next 12 months the comparison between the two sites. Traditional sort of methods, maybe brush cutting, maybe a bit of herbicide, maybe nothing, as opposed to goats over here, where they're going to graze all these weeds, they're going to target them, they're going to take out this biomass. We won't have this huge buildup of fuel and mulch that's problematic. It's all going to disappear. It's all going to become droppings from the goats. They're going to add carbon to the soil, add some nutrients to the soil, benefit the microbes in the soil. They'll all use all of that stuff for their advantage, and the environment will be much better off. Just remember, you can't eat this stuff, but you can eat goats. So you often hear that you can't keep goats in. They're great at getting out, and they can be. But you don't need fancy fencing. You can have just a simple 120 high fence like this, a good mesh fence, good hinge joint fence. Something like this is quite okay. Or you can even use temporary fencing like we've got down here, which we often use on our jobs. Easy to set up, just put it together, and that'll contain goats really, really well. So what we're after is a managed form of grazing. So we're not having them here all the time, we're putting them on and off over a long period of time. So we don't take everything away. And sometimes the weeds can work for you because we've got natural regen, but the goats are drawn towards the weeds. So we might take them off, let things grow back again, we put the goats back on, and they'll target and they'll look for the weeds in amongst some of the native vegetation that might be naturally emerging or that we planted. And that's the best result. And because we carefully manage the grazing, there's less pressure on the fence. So we're going to follow this site for the next 12 months, and you're going to see what the goats do, how we do conservation grazing. And you're going to be amazed at how they take the vegetation down, how they clean it out, how they open it up, and how we get some natural regen. So make sure you subscribe.